Sales is the most lucrative skill in the world, period. The problem is most sales advice out there today is outdated, cheesy, and can even keep you from getting the deals that can make all the difference in your career. This is the No BS Sales School, a podcast for entrepreneurs and salespeople who want to master the skill of selling without all the BS. Welcome to the No BS Sales School podcast. I'm your host, Walker McKay. Today is one of those more rare occasions where I have a guest on my show. My guest today is Matt DeHart. He is a financial coach with 6 years experience working with entrepreneurs and people who want to be entrepreneurs. What he says he does is he helps people get into their next big investment, which may be a business of your own. Maybe it's a college fund. Maybe it's retirement. Maybe it's just for something fun. That's a great guy. He was recommended to me by my friend Rochelle Carrington, an old somebody that I've known for a long, long time, respect very much. So we've been talking. And what I thought we'd talk about today, because Matt's an expert in this, is if you're thinking about starting your own company, thinking about starting your own thing, don't do it like I did. Don't just pull the ripcord and say, let's figure this shit out, because it was a disaster for me for a long time. My wife was very mad, and we've gotten out of it now. We're getting better at where we are, back in a better position, but holy shit, it was a mess. So Matt is going to share with us some great shit that you can do to get yourself better set up to start a business or to buy a business so that you can not have to work for the man anymore. Matt DeHart, welcome to our show.
Hey, Walker, I appreciate that introduction. I completely understand where you came from, and we've had a good time laughing about our stories. So thank you for having me on.
It's a mess. I'm happy to have you here. Matt, why don't you take 2 minutes and tell me how you got to where you are? How do you become a financial coach for people that want to do something stupid like start their own business?
Well, you're going to laugh, but I got a degree in international business.
Makes sense.
And I left international business and went into the pharmaceutical and medical device world right after college and loved it. I loved being in that corporate world. I loved being in medical offices, but it was just up and down. I'd have a job, I'd lose my job. That cut sales forces. And I mean, the first time you get laid off, you're like, what did I do wrong? And it was just money. And so over the next 11, 12 years, I got laid off 5 different times in the medical world.
That's not that uncommon either, is it?
Nah, it was. And crazy. I mean, they went from 65,000 reps down to 22,000 within a 2-year period. So finding another job was incredibly difficult. And I mean, my last job in medical sales, I was the international director for a medical device company. And it sounds glamorous, and it was. It had some really cool travel. Yeah. But then when gas prices go down, Saudi Arabia quits buying from you. And so my business tanked. And I decided to jump out on my own at that time and be an independent contractor for a company, and had a really hard time. I wasn't financially prepared to do it. So like you, I had to tell my wife why we never had enough money.
Yep.
And then I coached people and learned finances and taught people and helped them. And then just recently, I didn't feel like I was doing enough. And there were some changes at my last company that made it impossible for me to stay. And I left. I worked with Rochelle, our good friend Rochelle, and got into a position where I could get this company off the ground quickly. And I was financially prepared to make that leap. So that's what I do now, is help people get into that position financially to get to that next step, to make it to that next level. So that's... You
skipped a step though. You skipped a step because you said I was struggling. I was getting my ass kicked. And so then I started to coach people in their financial position. How in the hell did you learn? I mean, where did the light bulb go off that all of a sudden you went from, oh, well, I suck at this, to, gosh, I think I figured this out enough to teach other people? What happened there?
I had to get a coach. I found I had this person. My wife went to a basketball game for one of our kids, sat next to this person that was helping people get out of debt. And I had a lot of debt. And so we started working with this person and really started understanding the ins and outs of finances, because it doesn't really matter how much money you make if you spend it all at the end of the month. And so I learned those basics and started coaching those and getting better with my finances. And then I got in a position where we could buy an investment property and participate in some other investments. And then the market took off with our house and with our investment property. So yeah, that's how we got into that position. And I learned over the next 6 years and coached people at a very high level financially. And I loved it. I love when somebody calls and tells me they bought their first investment property, or they paid for their kids' college, or they can afford to send their kid to an Ivy League college instead of another college that's close to them. So it's extremely rewarding.
That is rewarding. So how did you find real estate to be your vehicle? What was the hook about real estate for you?
I was one of those guys years ago that heard one of those advertisements on the TV that said, hey, come learn how to flip houses. And I was like, oh, that would be cool. I've got a construction background. That's what I did as a kid. Okay. And I'm like, I could fix a house but I never had the money to do it. I never had the finances. And they always said, do it without your own money. But what they don't tell you is you got to have credibility. You got to have credibility and sales skills to talk people out of their money to do that. And so I learned how to flip trailer homes. That's what I started in, flipping trailer homes. Yeah. So if you go past a trailer park, you're going to see these some crappy homes there that nobody's living in. So I'd go to these trailer parks and say, hey, I'll take that trailer home away from you. I'll take it off your hands. I'll build it up. I'll fix it. And then I will sell it to someone and carry the note. And so I would do that. I did it a lot with the Hispanic population because I speak Spanish. I lived in South America for a couple of years, and I loved helping that community because they always paid. They were very loving and kind. And so that's where my niche was in that world. So I started with that, and I did some flipping houses and learned how to do that. But it always made me angry to hear these programs where you go learn how to flip houses and you have to pay $50,000 to do it. Right. And they don't guarantee you're going to get into one.
And then they tell you not to use your own money. And then you don't have any money because you gave them 50 grand.
Yeah. And I went to one of those seminars, and I was building a house at the time, and they were going to charge me that 50 grand, and they were going to get me into like 6 different credit cards to do that. And then I called my banker, and my banker's like, hey, you'll never get into your house if you make that commitment. And I walked away. Thank goodness I walked away. And I found a guy that I had him coach me how to do that same thing for about 10 grand. And I learned the same concepts. He flipped the first house with me. So he had skin in the game, and I trusted that. So, but yeah, I've always had that intrigue for real estate, but I never had that financial information to be able to get to that next level.
So right now, let's pretend, because my guess is a good portion of the No BS sales team is out there thinking, I'm sick and tired of working for the man. That this is okay. I call it Matt, if you and I talked about this, the 47-year-old problem, where a lot of people, 47 years old, you've been working about 25 years, and you look around and you're working your ass off, and you look up and you go, oh shit. When I was 22 and I thought 25 years out, I never thought I'd be doing this bullshit, or I'd be working for somebody who's not as smart as me or not as whatever. And then we make a choice, and the choice is either to, pull the ripcord, get the hell out of there, or you put your head down and you grind it out for another 15 years and just say, I'm going to count down the hours and days, and I'm going to quit at 65. And I, of course, made the pull the ripcord choice. And I think there's got to be a better way. And I think what you have come across is a better way. So tell me, let's talk about this. You've got somebody, let's pretend that they're making $300,000, $250,000, $250,000 a year. They've got their debt under control. And they say, Matt, I want to start my own business in 2 or 3 years. Yeah. How do you work with that guy? How do you help him? Is that enough time?
Yeah. And I love hearing people like that, because like you, I tried pulling the baby ripcord and going out and being an independent contractor. So I had the backing from a company, and it sucked. I didn't make any money for those 3 years.
Yep.
And so I went back, took a corporate gig. So when somebody comes to me like that, I ask them, do they really want to make it 2 to 3 more years, or do they want to be out of there at the end of the year? Because
usually the answer is the end of the year if they're serious.
Yeah. And at that point, if they say the end of the year, I get really excited, because if they're willing to step it up, tighten the belt for a little while, we can get them to that point within a year instead of 2 to 3 years. So what I do is I start looking at their finances. If you're making 250, 300, heck, even if you're making 90 grand to 100 grand, we can find some ways to get you into a position where you can make that leap. If you own a house, that's also another thing that you can fall back on. But don't make any of those decisions until you set yourself up financially, because if you have a W-2, that's the golden ticket when you go to the bank. Do these things before you get there. So I'll tell you just a quick story in the next couple of seconds. I had a CEO contact me a couple of years ago and said, "Hey, Matt, I've got a year worth of severance, and then my company's letting me go." And so what we did is I went over and we went through his finances. We figured a number that he needed to live on. And then he had a good chunk of money in the bank. And he also had a beautiful house that he almost owned outright. And so what we did is we took his savings, paid off his house, went to the bank, got a HELOC on his house for over $1 million before that W-2 ended. And then he had that money available to do whatever he needed. So he invested in what he wanted to. He invested in a couple of businesses, and he was able to weather that storm. But we had a year to prep for that before his W-2 disappeared. And so that's where I love helping people is I coach you through that process. I'm the one standing by your side, walking you through the banking system, walking you through how to get into that position. Where do you get the money? What do you do? Because if you've got the finances in place, it is so much less stressful to make that leap, because that's covered. Yeah. Now let's put together the business. That's what you guys are good at. Once you get the finances in place, it takes a lot of that stress off your shoulders.
So to some people, it sounds to me like the business could be, are you steering people towards the real estate business? Is that part of it, or is real estate business background for this, or what?
That's over the last 3 years, I've coached people into over 100 investment properties. I've coached school teachers all the way to multimillionaires. And I like real estate because it gives you a residual income. It makes it easier to retire, or it makes it easier. You could have a property that pays for your entire kid's college for the 4 years, or you could have a property that pays for all your travel for the full year. But that doesn't mean it's the only option. It may be jumping out and doing a business. I have a friend, she just jumped out and she started a powder coating business in Las Vegas. And it's exploding. That's what she invested in. And she's probably going to be able to sell it for millions of dollars in the next couple of years. And that was her big leap. So Did she know anything about powder coating before? Not at all. Not at all. But her husband and his brother had powder coated before, so they knew the business. She came in with the financial knowledge, and now they're doing extremely well. So I just talked to her as I drove through Vegas last week, and it's fun watching that, because you would have never guessed that this young girl from Hawaii, living out in the farmland of Hawaii, was going to be running a powder coating business in Las Vegas.
What are the kind of people, what are some things, what are some things that somebody, if you figured this out about them, you might tell them, don't start a business, stick with the W-2. You're going to be better off that way.
Well, there are some people that would rather stay with a W-2. I've got two examples. So one of the first people that I coached was my brother. And he works for a medical company here in Utah. It's a hospital company. It's the largest employer in Utah, and he does pretty well. Well, after I started coaching him, he started getting into some investment properties. And within the next 5 years, he went from one house to 4 houses. And now his investment properties almost double what he makes at his W-2 job. But he still works at the W-2 job, knowing that he could leave at any time. It gives them that flexibility to be able to leave and get out and do their own thing when they're ready. Mm-hmm. So I've also got a school teacher, a friend of mine out in Hawaii, and she bought 6 investment properties on a school teacher's salary. And now she decides she wants to stay a school teacher as long as she wants to. She doesn't have to decide to retire, or she has the option to do whatever she wants at that point. So some people may want to keep the W-2 and not jump out on their own,
and give them the option that when they want to pull the trigger to get out, they can. But tell me something. I mean, Matt, for real now, school teacher's salary, what's that, 60, 80 grand? Something like that, roughly. Mm-hmm. And to get into 6 investment, how in the world do you find because if you're not living in it, these must be some of your secrets. So if you're not living in it, how the hell do you find 30% down payment on 6 investment properties, unless they're $1,000 a piece?
Yeah. And it depends. There's a lot of different options. One of the things I like doing with people is setting those goals up front. Where do you want to go? Because you and I both know it's when you're creating a business, you got to have at least some direction.
Yes.
And if you say you want 6 investment properties in the next 10 years, you got to at least write it down and start working backwards on how do I get there? Mm-hmm. Because getting that first property, it's like making your first million. That's always the hardest one part to do. And so that one may take a little bit longer to get into. But as we all saw over the last 5 years, my house more than doubled in value. Mm-hmm. That made it easier for me to leverage things to get into the next property and the next property. So
makes sense.
Again, it takes that goal and working backwards from there. And for me, it took a coach. There's people out there that can go out, pound it out, but you and I do what we do because we've seen the benefit of having a guide, having somebody to help us to that next level. And I'm a huge fan of it. That's how I met you, was a coach that I went to get me to that next level.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big believer. People are so often surprised when they are, you've got a coach. And at one time I had 3 at the same time, which was too many. But I have
2 right now.
Yeah, so I've got 2 for different areas of my business. Right. And and to me, I'd rather have somebody say, hey, here's a good idea, instead of me wondering and screwing. It usually costs me 4 times as much when I don't have an expert with me. There's that funny saying I talk about myself all the time. Whenever I think something's going to be simple, it just means I don't understand it. Yes. Right? It means I got no freaking idea, and I'm about to get a really expensive lesson. So you mentioned something, Matt. You said, the real estate market's been so great in the last couple of years. My house has doubled in value, and that's cool. But right now, people are complaining. Shit, are we? Is this the top? Have we overdone? Is everything too expensive? It's hard to find anything in the marketplace. I mean, how do you talk people through that?
Well, and again, I give people the answer. It depends a lot, because it depends what your goals are. If you're going to get into real estate and keep it for a while, I mean, the best time to plant a shade tree was 30 years ago.
Or
the next
today.
Best time is today.
That's right.
And that's the same with real estate. If you keep real estate long enough, you're going to make money on it. So I bought a house in 2006 in Colorado. I needed to sell it in 2011. And I went from being 150,000 in the positive to being 50 grand in the negative.
I did that about the same time frame. Same thing. It's not primary residence.
Yeah. And it was horrible because I needed to move for a job. So I put my house on the market knowing I'm going to lose 30 to 50 grand on it. Well, I ended up doing an owner finance, and I owner financed it to somebody and carried that note for 3 years. They couldn't buy the house. I turned around and sold it the day after they told me they couldn't buy it. I called my realtor. He put it on the market. We sold it the next day, and I made money off of it. the thing I like about real estate is even with the ups and downs with real estate, you can be very creative. And again, if you're going to be in this for the long haul, real estate works really well. I have a good friend that is a dermatologist, very successful dermatologist here in Utah. And one of the things I had the opportunity to pick his brain for an hour or so. I helped him.
After he picked your face, you got to pick his brain, right? Yeah, right.
And he told me, he goes, Matt, I've done a lot of investing in my life, but he goes, if I could take it all back and just focus on one thing, I would have kept all of my real estate. He said, I would have made 2 to 3 times what I've made on my other investments if I would have kept it. So, and again, I like that it's a brick and mortar. You've got something physical, but again, I'm not downplaying other investments. I love other investments.
What are some examples of other investments that, besides powder coating? What are some other investments that you say you've been great, and maybe there's something people hadn't thought of before?
Well, and one of the things I'm not a financial planner. And so I love working with financial planners because I free up more cash flow for people. I free up more money to go back to their financial planner and invest in that. So
nice. Yep.
Almost 9 years ago, my dad passed away just suddenly out of the blue. And we had to figure out how to invest his life insurance for my mom so that she could live on it. And we went to our financial planner. They put it in some good plans, and she's been able to live on the interest on that money over the last 9 years. So There's some people that don't want real estate, but there's a lot of better and other investments that fit their needs. There's also,
you could do bond ladders and all those kind of liquid things like that. Although bonds don't pay shit right now. So unless you've got a gazillion dollars put in bonds and don't need much to live on, it's liquid, but it's anyway.
Yeah.
But other things like what?
And then right now, given this one's still real estate oriented, but there's a vacation property that I'm invested in here in Utah, and it's a low maintenance. Once it goes up, I invest. I don't have to touch it. I don't have to rent it out. I don't have to do anything. I just collect a paycheck at the end of the month for the profit margins on this place. So it's still being under construction, but that's one that we've got.
Because somebody else manages, it'll be like Airbnb or something, and you just somebody else goes and does that.
Yep, and it's a vacation company that manages that, and I do have an Airbnb. I have a property up in Salt Lake City, downtown Salt Lake City, 45 minutes away from 8 different ski resorts, and it's been one of my best investments. It's somebody just checked out yesterday, and the best part is you sit here at home, you pull up your Airbnb account, and you're like, "Hey, look at that! I got a guy that cleans it for me." I manage the website, but it takes me maybe half hour a month to manage that and check pricing, and that's one that I like because I'm not a landlord. I don't feel like a landlord. I don't have to kick people out. They pay me up front. And so that's another one in the real estate realm. But again, there's a lot of businesses out there. I love small businesses. And I also.
So do you work with business brokers and stuff like that too? Are they people that you would associate with or not really?
Yeah. Depending. I mean, I'm not going to be sending them a lot of people. I'm not going to be this huge golden goose for them, but business brokers are good. Because I also own, my wife and we own 2 franchises of a magazine here in Utah.
Wow. Okay.
And this is what it looks like. It's a small local magazine that goes out, and all it is advertising for local businesses. And I get to help my wife with that because I like talking to people, but that didn't cost us very much to get into. And so I try diversifying because I want to see other options. I may find something down the road that I like much better than real estate. But
so what are some mistakes that you see people make that you would want to warn them? If you could warn the No BS sales team about where people step on their crank and don't do things, they really screw something up. What is that?
Well, a lot of times we do things out of urgency. You know what that's like. Again, sometimes urgency is the best way to do something, but also sometimes it can really hurt you. And so also prepare yourself when times are good. That's the best advice I could give. Be careful when you're in one of those valleys. When you're in a valley, you're reacting, you're more reactive than you're proactive. So a lot of times people will jump out and leverage everything right away.
So what kind of a war chest, what kind of cash sitting around would you suggest somebody have so that they could be, I know it depends upon their situation, but percentage of income or that, what kind of percentage, what kind of thing would you suggest somebody have set aside before they jump out? Or if that's even a calculation you make.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty simple calculation. I would look at your finances now, see what you spend monthly, and then see what you can live on. Cut that down because we know we're all living above what we could technically live on.
Yep.
And see what that number is and times it by 6, times it by 12. And then, and then you want to look at the type of business that you're going to be doing. When I jumped out to do this business, I planned on at least 6 months, no income.
Okay.
And I mean, we lucked out. I mean, we were able to cover our expenses in month 2, which I loved, but I was planning on 6 months to a year without any income.
And that's still okay to have that reserve set aside just in case.
Yes. Just in case. But again, when you start making that money, that starts shrinking. You're closing that gap. You may be 10,000 in the negative the first month, which I was. I was that or more in the first month. But then the second month, I'm like, sweet, we can make our mortgage payment with this. We can do a lot of things. Isn't that a nicest
feeling? Yeah.
Yeah. And again, even if your group here, the No BS group, one recommendation I like to give people is put a home equity line of credit on your house. That's money, that's equity that you guys have right now if you own a house. And the good thing about that is that can help you if things get rough. Right now, if you were to lose your job and you didn't have that, the bank can come take your house the second you miss that mortgage payment.
Yep.
But if you have something like that in place, you can use all of that before the bank comes and takes your house. And you may be able to weather the next storm before that happens.
That's great. Hey, can I tell you, Matt, a couple of things that I've learned talking to you today?
Yeah.
Number one, and this is not rocket science, but it's first of all, identify expenses and that your money you're going out the door right now and look at what's necessary versus what is nice to have. Knowing that if your goal is to create additional income through buying a business, starting a business, or paying for college fund in the future, you can do it from your income right now. If you can just figure out where do I cut some things away that are nice to have, but I don't have to have them and set that aside, and then you can move forward. So that was one. Number two, I learned, and again, I knew that, but that was a good reminder. And number two was you're looking at real estate with the creativity part, right? There can be owner financing. There can be, if you owner finance, they don't pay, you can take the thing back and then sell it. You can create lease to own options. You do all kinds of stuff. And then you can also, as you know, refinance those things and take out cash tax-free if you choose to do so. Anyway, those are great things. Matt, how would somebody get in touch with you if they wanted to know more about your program and how they could work with you?
The best way, you can email me. My email address is Matt, MATT, at highlinefinancialcoaching.com.
It's HIGHLINE financialcoaching.com. And we'll have that in the show notes. If you guys want to go talk to Matt, I highly recommend. He's a great guy, straight shooter, and was recommended by a very dear friend of mine whom I trust implicitly. So if you want that kind of help, please reach out to Matt. Would love to hear the kind of results that you're getting as well. No BS sales team. If you like this podcast, you like what you've heard, how about share this with somebody else that needs to hear it? I bet there are a lot of people that you talk to that said, I hate my job. I'm ready to go do something else, or I'm ready to get done with this sooner. I'm ready to do my own thing. Share with them. May get some ideas from this. Maybe they reach out to Matt. If you are struggling with sales and you're saying, I'm not so sure if I'm doing this right or not, I don't know what I don't know, I need to talk to you, Walker, because it's important to me to go make more money so that I can have more freedom in my life. Pick up the phone and call me, 803-917-2817, or email me, walker@walkermckay.com. Thank you for listening to OBS Sales Team. Matt, thanks for being a guest on the show. Can't thank you enough, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks for listening to OBS Sales School Podcast. If you haven't already, please take 1 minute to write a quick review for the show. It really does make a huge difference. Also, subscribe to the show and please forward this episode to somebody else who needs to hear it. As a bonus for listening, I'm going to give you access to a free mini course, 7 expensive sales mistakes you're making and what you can do about it. Go to www.7salesmistakes.com and get access to the free mini course. That's the number 7salesmistakes.com. Thanks again for listening to the OBS Sales School Podcast.